What's shaking, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Eurythmics, and we're returning for another bonus tune included in the expanded folder for their 1989 album We Tour 1. Thank you again to Phil. And it's See No Evil. So this is a phrase that's actually used in a couple different ways depending on where you are. I think ultimately it derives from a Japanese, I forget what they call them, they're like these visual tableaus, and then there are lessons you can derive from them. But in that context, in a Buddhist context, in a Far Eastern context, it actually refers to blocking out evil thoughts and evil deeds in a more positive conception of the phrase. But I think in most, let's say, Western countries, it's a phrase that's part of this hear no or see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, which is seen as like turning a blind eye. The idea of like out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to think about bad things that are going on. I'm not going to talk about them. I'm even going to shield my eyes so that I don't have to process that or respond to it in some way that would be obligated if I consider myself a moral being. So again, in an Eastern context, I think it's actually a more positive phrase that means avoid bad thoughts, words, or deeds, whereas in a Western context, it's more you're shirking your responsibility by just pretending that things aren't bad in some places, and therefore you don't have to do anything about it. So I don't know which interpretation I would find more likely. I suppose the one that is more critical, or the idea that you are avoiding bad interactions or phenomena as a way to give yourself an excuse not to do anything in response. But ultimately, even if that is the case, I wouldn't be surprised if it's nuanced or mixed or perhaps extrapolated down to an interpersonal context. Either way, I'll see what I can catch on a first listen. This is Eurythmics. The track is See No Evil, and it's a bonus tune included in an expanded folder for their 1989 album We Tour 1.
You don't know what it's like to see things the way I do. So take a little piece of time and step into my dancing shoes. 'Cause it's just a cruel existence. Yeah, it's a vicious place. Everybody's crowding in. They got to take that space. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. They're gonna pump up some more action. They're gonna blast out another round. They're gonna move in with a camera to catch another kid gone down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up, you better cool down. If you wanna get up.
What a crazy tune. Sonically, it does feel like a B-side because it feels more experimental, kind of like they're throwing different ingredients at a track and, sort of seeing how it all comes together. The bass line, the funky bass line, is certainly the impossible to ignore sonic element, and it has this lolloping along, heavy with a bit of funk sound to it. There's also some like keyboard sounds that feels like there's like a soft, almost like church organ just subtly in the background, as well as some like cosmic electric type of sounds, as well as like a cosmic blues guitar, which has definitely a slightly different flavor to it than a lot of the other Sonics. There's a true piano line with a bit of a jazzy, funky feel, and that's kind of flourishing right at the end when it strips down. Their vocals are almost like deadpan monotone, and I don't quite know, like, it feels very busy, not necessarily in a bad way, but I kept like wondering like how to characterize what I was hearing sonically and musically. And as I said, it feels a bit experimental. It feels like it's like a mixing pot of styles and sounds, and they just kind of stirred it and saw, or waited to see what would come out of it. Lyrically, as Luca like rolls against the door, it does feel like the Western concept, at least at first. Like there were lines about like it's if you could see things the way I could see them, you'd know this. It's brutal. It's tough out here. Is like a lot of struggling and difficulty, which feels again like the idea of seeing no evil is like, well, the person being addressed is just kind of like, I'm only going to look at things that are comfortable and make me feel okay, and that I don't have to worry about what else is happening, and by extension, I don't need to change my ways or reach out to help others because, I don't hear or see any evil. It's, that's all some other thing that I'm not paying attention to. And the narrator's saying like, if you could only see things the way I would, you'd know there is a lot of bad stuff out there, and maybe then you'd be compelled to do things differently than you are now. But I don't quite know how to, or what to make of that mantra that like, if you want to get up, you got to cool down, which like cooling down sounds like, calming down, not being so busy and frantic or, so intense and emotional, which sounds almost like the opposite of what she's suggesting. If you could see things the way I could, then you'd know it's tough out there and maybe you'd be more inclined to action. So yeah, I don't quite know what to make of that mantra. As I said, it feels like an experimental track, one that's, was in the process of development, and they just said, well, let's throw it on a B-side. It doesn't feel like a full, dense, and powerful Eurythmics tune. But by the same token, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's like, it's quirky. It has a weird funkiness to it. Again, the bass line leading the way in that regard. Their vocal delivery also being a bit surprising, and almost like again, monotone chorus. It's not any layered with big expressive belts and so on, nor like heavy emotional weight. It just feels like a bit of a crazy little experimental tune. So I don't know if other people will hear it the same way, but I'm not surprised it wasn't on the album proper. But that is still not necessarily a criticism of it, certainly not independently. Maybe by comparison to some other tracks of theirs, including on this album proper, I'd say, well, I'd listen to those more than I would listen to this. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad tune, just kind of a weird tune. So I look forward to hearing what people have to say. Let me know, and I will see you next time. Peace.